Hey, welcome to our weekly 3 Minute Therapy podcast with me, Michael Edelstein. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm here with my trusty co host, Mick Berry, who is an REBT expert. So, what's REBT? REBT stands for Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, and it's a form of psychotherapy devised in the 1950s by Albert Ellis, an author of about 80 books, who changed the course of psychotherapy from the old Freudian psychoanalytic view to the more current view that our emotions don't come from situations like our childhood or our Oedipus complex, but rather our emotions come from our thinking about situations. And if you feel emotionally disturbed, if you're anxious, depressed, or angry, that comes from a particular type of thinking in terms of must. I must do well and get approval. Others must treat me well, or my life must go well. So if you're disturbed, look for your must, look for your should, look for the demand, and question, challenge, and contradict your demand. Now, demands must have derivative forms such as I must do well and I can't stand it if I don't, or you must treat me well and I can handle your poor treatment, or my life must go well and I can't put up with hassles in my life. So, as musts are irrational, so are this derivative, the I can't stand it. Mick, did you want to add to the introduction?
Well, yeah, I have a lot to say about this. Do you want me to talk about just what the concept of can't stand it is, or you want me to talk about the solutions to thinking that way?
Yeah, why don't you just say anything on your mind related to this?
Okay. Yeah. Well, the thing is, we often, at least I've found in my experience, will tell myself, I can't stand something. And then if I tell myself, well, I can stand it, when I first started cognitive therapy and then REBT, I would work myself into a tizzy over thinking, well, that means I must live with it and like it. And that's not correct. REBT doesn't ask people to live with things that they don't like. It says that thinking that we cannot stand that a situation is more than we can deal with is inaccurate and actually hinders us from doing whatever it is we might be able to do in order to change the situation. So I can't stand it, change it to I can stand it doesn't mean liking the situation and not trying to change the situation.
Yeah, often people escalate, I don't like it, into I can't stand it. Also, another problem with I can't stand it is it's a statement about the future. If I've done poorly in the past, that doesn't mean I'm going to do poorly or have hassles in the future. So I don't know if I can stand it or not unless I face it. And then when you face it, you'll find out you can stand it. It didn't kill you. You survived. Mick?
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize I've seen many people think that they have to like a situation. And I'm emphasizing that because people often confuse thinking there are two choices, believing they can't stand a situation or thinking that they better learn to like the situation. And that's not what we're talking about. Now, as far as getting out of the mindset of I can't stand it, you have been very helpful. When I first started working on this, I would do well in telling myself I can stand this situation. And if I work to stand this situation, then I'm going to get to where I'm accepting it and I'm feeling okay in this situation. And I thought that standing it involved me getting to the point where I had no anxiety about it. But you astutely pointed out to me I am going to stand any situation. And we like semantic precision in REBT. And so I started being semantically precise. What did I mean by I can't stand a situation? And that, what I was meaning by that was I really had no choice except to fall apart and curl up on my bed whimpering. And that, no, that's not the case. Even if I am falling apart and curling up on my bed, whimpering. I'm still standing the situation. I'm not blowing up. This situation is not going to make me explode and end. I am standing this situation no matter what in the world I do. And so thinking that I can't stand a situation is entirely incorrect. And then you astutely pointed out the best scenario, and it's not impossible to achieve and not even that hard to achieve when done with the right kind of work. The best scenario is to stand the situation and not have anxiety about it. But even if we are having anxiety within a situation, it is incorrect to say, I cannot stand this situation. I don't like this situation, and I don't like feeling anxiety in this situation, but I don't have to worry about not standing a situation or standing a situation. And when you pointed that out to me and I saw that as an insight, it was much easier to not have anxiety in the situation because I didn't have to work so hard in order to achieve no anxiety.
Yeah, once you see through your irrational beliefs, then that usually makes life much easier. Also, when you have anxiety, I have a client like this right now. She has anxiety and she's telling herself, I can't stand the anxiety. So that just makes it worse. That just magnifies it. So the idea, I can't stand a situation, tends to magnify how bad the situation is and how bad you feel about it. Nick?
And yeah, that's a great point because we know that one of the worst experiences somebody can have psychologically, emotionally, is a secondary anxiety, anxiety about anxiety. And I think, tell me if this is correct, I think that anxiety about anxiety comes from the thought of, I can't stand anxiety.
Could you say that again? I was
Yeah,
distracted.
does a secondary disturbance, anxiety about anxiety, come from the thought, I cannot stand anxiety?
Well, it can come from that thought, but it also could come from I must not feel anxious, or it's awful to feel anxious. And as you said, Mick, I can't stand feeling anxious. So that would be what we call in REBT a secondary disturbance. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, now I could be wrong about this, but I think the most common thought would be, I can't stand anxiety. In my experience talking to people, that's what they tell themselves the most often, though I could be wrong.
Yeah. You mean when they feel anxious, they're telling themselves that, or
When
when they
they're
feel
having a secondary disturbance, they're
Oh, I
telling
see. Yeah.
themselves, I cannot.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So more so than I must not be anxious or it's awful to be anxious. Usually it's I must not feel anxious. I
I
mean, I
cannot,
can't stand
I
feeling anxious.
cannot stand feeling anxious. I
Right.
found that
Yeah.
to be the most common thought, though you
Yeah.
are, thank you for pointing out that's not necessarily the only thought. There are other thoughts, but one advantage in citing the most common thought is we're able to nip it in the bud more quickly,
Yeah. Yeah.
if
And
that's what we're thinking.
yeah, yeah, I agree with that. And speaking of nipping it in the bud, I often have clients who say to me, well, what do I do when I'm feeling anxious? And what I tell them, well, there are various things you can do or say to yourself when you feel anxious, but a better way to deal with anxiety and learning to tolerate anxiety is by questioning that idea, I can't stand anxiety on a regular basis when you're not in the situation. When you're anxious, it's often harder to think clearly and question your irrational thinking. So I recommend to my clients that they write out 3-minute exercise, which largely consists of writing out an irrational belief, such as I can't stand anxiety, and then questioning it. What's the evidence? And then showing yourself there's on many ways, there's no evidence. So if you do that on a regular basis, Then when you're in a situation, say you're performing, and many people make themselves anxious about performing, you're going to perform. Don't wait till a minute before you go on stage, but question your irrational beliefs. Write out the questions, write out the answers, looking for evidence for the irrational beliefs. And because they're irrational, there's no evidence for them. So write that out on a regular basis before the performance, not just at the performance. Yeah.
And I just wanted to say, when you pointed out to me that I'm going to stand a situation no matter what I do, I saw the folly of the thought, I can't stand it, and the folly of the thought, I can't stand anxiety. And once I realized that, then the secondary disturbance pretty much went away. And I can honestly say I never have any secondary disturbance, and I used to have that problem a lot. And it wasn't just a matter of working hard at REBT, but it was finding the insightful. I think Freud said insight alone is not a solution. Yeah, it might not be a solution, but it's a hell of a useful thing to have, because he had no insight for anything virtually. Well, some things maybe he had insight on how to walk. But in any case, uh, REBT does work very, very well when we pinpoint what the irrational thought is. Our anxiety, our depression, our rage goes away. It's a matter of finding the thought and working to get rid of the thought. And sometimes it does take a lot of work to diminish and get rid of the irrational thought, because we have a lifelong habit of believing our irrational thoughts. And even if we don't have a lifelong habit, we as human beings, as you have pointed out, are demand-making machines. So to counter that, it takes practice, practice, practice. But it gets easier and easier, like anything that you practice.
Yeah, exactly. And Mick, you insightfully mentioned some ways that people go astray in trying to uh, overcome their can't stand it itis. And in the last chapter in my book is 3 Minute Therapy, Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life. In the last chapter in the book, I discuss some ways people block themselves from overcoming their irrational beliefs and ways to deal with that. And one, I think you said, Mick, one is making sure that your irrational belief that you're working on is meaningful, that it's something you're really telling yourself and not just something that you're saying because you know it could be the right thing to say.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because countering our irrational beliefs does need to be meaningful to us in order for them to work. And generally, what is the most meaningful is what is realistic. Now, sometimes I suppose the thought, if I'm having anxiety, I can't stand driving over bridges, and then I'm telling myself I can stand driving over bridges, that might not give me give me what I need to rid myself of the anxiety. But if I have the thought, millions and millions and millions of people have driven over the bridge and nothing has ever happened to them, I don't need a guarantee that nothing's going to ever happen to me, but the odds are vastly in my favor that I'm going to be okay. All right, now maybe that thought will be the thing that allows me to get rid of my anxiety and driving over bridges.
Yeah, that brings up another subject, which could be the subject of a future podcast, and that is the demand for guarantees. You don't have a guarantee when you drive over the bridge, it's not going to collapse. There have been bridges in history that have collapsed. You don't have a guarantee, but you can stand driving over the bridge without a guarantee that it's not going to collapse. And if it collapses and you die, well, one day you're going to be dead anyway. So it is a fact of life. Mick?
Yeah, and I was going to say that we don't have guarantees, and demanding guarantees definitely will do make us. I was going to say do us in, but that's inaccurate. It won't do us in. It will just make us feel done in. But REBT does want people to feel good while they're living their life as best as they can. And even if we are killed by a bridge collapsing, we're standing it as much as it happens. And if it kills us, well, whatever that situation may be, non-existence, existence in some two-dimensional form, whatever it is, we will still be within that framework of existence or non-existence. So when we're telling ourselves, I can't stand something, we're saying that this is a situation I absolutely must not be in. And we are in every situation that we are. So there's no situation that we must not be in, including dying.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I don't have anything more to say about the idea of I can't stand it, an irrational idea. Mick, did you have any final words?
I'm sure there must be something. You know, I did think while we're doing this podcast, I find it very interesting because I'll go so far as to say that REBT really does have the answers for getting rid of emotional distress. And by that, I mean depression, anger, or rage. And it isn't that widely known and not widely practiced in the sense of people learning how to do it and then applying it to their lives. I do think that people think rationally throughout their lives, in addition to thinking irrationally. REBT just points out how to think rationally. But our podcast is very limited in the number of people that watch it. And so I just like to mention that if anybody has any big problems, any emotional problems, I can personally working with them on the telephone. But I know that people are skeptical of things, and that's very good. But put it to the test. Whenever you're having an emotional problem, whenever you are upset about anything, there is a demand taking place. Look for the demand. It is there. REBT says it's there. It holds up. It works. The way we think determines our feelings. Whenever we feel, we are thinking, which is connected to that feeling. And if it's a self-defeating feeling, then we can change it so that it's self-helping. I'll go so far as to say that REBT has the answers for human emotional distress.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And in closing, I also want to mention that in addition to Mick Berry being an REBT expert, Mick is also an actor and has a one-man show. Do you want to say something about your one-man show, Mick?
Oh, well, yeah, I've got several one-man shows. I've got one coming up on July 21st. Thank you, in San Rafael, California, through the Marin Shakespeare Festival. You can find out about it there. And then I'm going to be in Boise, Idaho on July 28th. The one in July 21st is about Keith Moon, drummer for The Who, and boy, did he have psychological problems. And the show is all about the great music of The Who and the crazy life of Keith Moon. And then on July 28th, the show is entitled Dad Fought Hitler, the Bottle and Me, and it's about my father as a World War II prisoner of war in Germany and the turmoil in our family and the resolution of him and he and I learning to become friends. So thanks. I didn't think of that. Thank you for those plugs.
You're welcome, Mick. Okay, and thanks for participating with me. Again, Mick Berry. I'm Dr. Michael Edelstein, clinical psychologist. And you can see my website at 3minutetherapy.com. 3 is spelled out, and there are ways to contact me there. Also, I want to thank Chris Rossini, our tech engineer, who we could not do this without. And comment below if you have any thoughts about what we discussed. Give us a thumbs up if you found it valuable. Suggest subjects for future podcasts, and volunteer if you'd like to get some free therapy from Nick and I. You could do that on one of our podcasts. We have on occasion had guests to discuss the problem. And subscribe to the 3 Minute Therapy podcast to do what, Mick?
To stay on the rational side of life.